All right, so written down some of these pressures that have affected you, and just keep those, there, and maybe, you can. I'd love for that to be a point of victory, after this, and we'll have some follow-ups, but you can overcome these things. So what we want to talk about is a section in James, and turn in your Bible to James chapter 4. So either your paper Bible or your iPhone Bible.
Not
Android Bible too, And so we will look at James chapter 4, starting in verse 13. And before we go through that, just to give you a little background, James, the Bible scholars are pretty sure that this is James, the half-brother of Jesus. And after Jesus died and rose and ascended to heaven, James became a leader in the Jerusalem church, in the church there of Jerusalem that where a lot of Jewish Christians, Jews who had become Christians, were coming to church. He is writing to not only that congregation, but to these to Jewish Christians all over the Roman Empire. Now, Judaism in that first century Rome was an official religion. It was officially recognized as a religion, so that Jews could worship and not be outwardly persecuted. And in the mid-first century, Christians were coming out from under that umbrella. They were under the umbrella of Judaism at first, but they began to be seen as a separate religion gradually. And in the mid-first century, the Christians were beginning to come out from under that and feel some persecution. They were feeling some, being left out. They were being left out of the economic system. They were being just ostracized in society, and even sometimes outright oppressed by wealthy people. And so that's kind of what's going on. It was kind of a mixed group that he was writing to in this letter. It was both the Jewish Christians who are being really persecuted and feeling poor and left out, and there were also these prosperous people. Rome was a up-and-coming empire. It was getting stronger. In the first century, it was really getting wealthy, and there were these tradesmen and landowners that were making a lot of money, and they were probably like those types of people today. They knew how to curry favor with powerful people, and so they were maybe even warming up to Christianity. I mean, they liked what Christianity had to offer, the spirit of generosity, the spirit of love. I mean, those things are attractive. And so they were attracted to that. But, and many of them probably became Christians. I mean, we know, Paul went to that group and took the gospel into the Gentile world. But many of them probably were like today. They conveniently set their Christianity aside when it came to pursuing a business deal. And so there was that type in the group as well. So you had the people coming from Judaism who were Christians, very committed. They were kind of getting persecuted, but then you had these kind of worldly people that were conveniently in the congregation too, very wealthy. And you can kind of see the dynamic going on. What was happening was the Jewish Christians were kind of, envying these rich worldly people and wishing they could be like that, and kind of like, well, I might put my Christianity to the side too. There's just lots of that kind of thing going on. It caused this church to be full of divisions, and these were believers doubting their faith because of their trials. They were showing signs of hypocrisy because of the word, and they were failing to carry out what the word said. They were just calling themselves Christians and not carrying it out. And they were fawning over these rich people. And they were also committing sins of the tongue and also having quarrels. And so James is calling them out. And so I'll just read these verses, 4:13 through 17. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we shall go to such and such a place and spend a year there and engage in business and make a profit. Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." Okay, so he is talking to these influencers. He's talking to these wealthy merchants. And he's saying, come now, I mean, you say you're going to go off and do this trip, and, you could substitute anything in there, really. But in this case, he says, you're going off and do this trip. Now, do you notice anything unusual about that address of those people or what they're going to do? Do you notice anything unusual about that? Are they doing something really weird or strange?
Making a profit.
Making a profit.
That part just kind of stood out to me.
Okay.
It's because even if you could substitute, like, they're going to the beach to enjoy themselves or something like that. And like in this example, they specifically say, let's go to vague place and do this specific thing.
Yeah. Okay. He does mention the specific thing of making a profit. Do you think that was that unusual for that period of time?
Probably not.
Right. That's the point. It's very normal. And that right there is the exact point. It's very normal. They were doing a very normal thing, going about their life. And what's wrong with this? And James tells us in the next verse. Yet you do not know what your life is like tomorrow. You're just a vapor that appears for a little while and then vanishes away. So James presents them with an obvious truth. You can't even keep yourself alive for a day. And you're making all these grand plans. And it's like Proverbs 27:1 says, do not boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what the day may bring forth. So it's not the specific plan that James has a problem with. It's that they're going about their planning without any thought of God whatsoever. Not one thought of God, not anything. Never crossed their mind. And these people were probably in the church, going to church. So, what should they have done? The next verse says, instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we shall live and do this or that. So he tells them the attitude they should have had. If the Lord wills is an attitude of acknowledgement of God. It's acknowledgement that there is a God in heaven and that he cares about what we do. And that he wants us to call on him. Then in verse 16, he kind of presses it and he says, but as it is, you boast in your arrogance. Whoa, so he calls them arrogant. Now, that's a rebuke. And he says they're arrogant. Now, normally we say boasting and arrogance is when someone says something that vaults themselves up, makes themselves superior. In this case, it was what they didn't say. I mean, they didn't call on God. They didn't acknowledge God. And that was arrogant. And so, then in verse 17, he says, therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin. And this is like a proverb. So he's saying, he's rebuking them for what they've done, and then he's calling them on this mindset of keeping God out of their plans. That mindset is sin. They should have known better. So you see, back then there was a danger. It's a danger that exists with us today, which is that straying away to the point where the people of God are essentially living as though there was no God. That's the danger. That's what these people were doing. So, what I'd like to do on your card now, on the other side, I want you to write down just 2 or 3 ideas from James that came to you. Because James has some things that we're going to talk about in a second that are application oriented, but I want anything that pricked your mind, pricked your spirit, or prompted your spirit, that came to your mind about what stood out, 2 or 3 things about those verses in James. If you just write them down on the other side of that card, it'll take a minute.